So today we're going to graph quadratics. So we're actually going to talk about what we're going to do is we're going to talk about everything we need to find before we actually put anything on the graph paper. So there's two types how it's going to be written. There's going to be two ways that it's going to be written. It's going to be written in function form, where f of x equals ax squared plus bx plus c, or it's going to be y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. And a, b, and c are all numbers, okay? They can be any type of number. You guys remember this is function notation, so this can change. This could be, you could see f of x, h of x, g of x. It still means the same thing. Or you can see y. They all mean the same thing. We're going to graph it. And you guys, if you remember from algebra, when you saw this, your graph was a parabola. So the first thing you really need to do, and I didn't write this in my first period, the first thing that you really need to do is you really need to define A, B, and C. So we're just going to put that little step in. We're going to say define A, B, and C. Because those are really going to be useful when we get into factoring, when we complete the square. So you want to remember what is A, what is B, what is C. So A is always in front of x squared, always. It's always the coefficient of x squared. B is always the coefficient of the x, and C is what we call our constant term. It's the one without the variable. So again, A is the coefficient of x squared, always. B is the coefficient of x, and C is our constant term. If there's no x, that means B is 0. If there is no number without a variable, it means there's no constant term, and it means it's 0. Okay. Now, number 2. What we need to do is we need to look at A. And the thing that you need to remember is that, again, I'm going to tell you that A is the coefficient of x squared. That's not going to change. If A is positive, that means that number is positive, the parabola opens up. Okay, so A is that number, A is in front of the x squared. So if it's positive, it means you're going to have a parabola, which is the U-shaped graph, open up. If A is negative, then the parabola opens down. And it doesn't seem like it's important, but when you go to graph it, if you're like, well, A is negative, so it should open down, and your graph opens up, then you know you've done something incorrect. So that's why this is important. Hey, look at that A. What do I know about my graph? Okay. Number 3, now what we're going to do is we're going to determine what our vertex is. We're going to determine if our vertex is the maximum or the minimum value. So we're going to determine if that vertex is the maximum or minimum value. Well, how do you know if the vertex is the maximum or minimum? Oh, tough day today. Is whether if A is positive or negative, okay? Okay, so if A is positive, the vertex is the minimum value, which makes sense because if your A is positive, it opens up. So we're just going to draw like a little graph just so you guys can see. If it opens up, right, your vertex is down here. Well, that makes sense. It opens up, then your vertex is at the bottom of your graph. If your parabola opens down, right, then your vertex is at the top. So that means if your vertex is at the top, that makes your maximum value. If your vertex is at the bottom, that makes it your minimum value. So it kind of makes sense that way. So those are things not necessarily that you have to work out, but those are things that you need to know so that when you go to graph the quadratic, you know I'm graphing it in the right place. Okay, so now step 4. You need to find the axis of symmetry. That axis of symmetry is what cuts the parabola in half. So if in geometry, you learned about the line of symmetry, this is kind of the same thing. It cuts the parabola in half. It's just called the axis of symmetry. You do need to know that the axis of symmetry is a line. So when you go to write your answer, if I specifically ask you to find the axis of symmetry, the x has to be there because it's a line. The axis of symmetry is just not a number, it's a line. So x equals the opposite of b over 2a. That doesn't mean negative b, it means the opposite of b. So whatever b is, you take the opposite of it. And that's the axis of symmetry. And what that's going to do is it's just going to cut that parabola right in half. And what's nice is it becomes a mirror. So whatever on one side happens on the other side. Number 5 is we're going to need to find the vertex. And to find the vertex, we're going to use the axis of symmetry. That is why you have to find the axis of symmetry, because you can't find the vertex unless you have the axis of symmetry. So, okay, so to find the vertex, you're going to plug the axis of symmetry in for x and solve for y. You guys, not always is your axis of symmetry going to be a fraction. Most times, I don't want to say most times, but it can be an integer, like -1, 1, 0. No, it won't ever be 0. Well, it could be, depending on if b is 0. Sometimes it's a fraction, sometimes it's not. But you're going to take that number that you get in step 4 and you're going to plug it in for x into whatever equation you have, and then you will find your axis of symmetry. You'll find your vertex. So you're going to take your axis of symmetry, you're going to plug it into your equation, you're going to get an answer, and then your vertex is going to be the axis of symmetry, comma, your answer. Okay, now, the last thing that you need to do is you need to find, well, it's not the last thing, but it is close to the last thing, is to find the y-intercept. Okay? And that is number 6. And to find the y-intercept, you're going to plug 0 in for x and solve for y. Now there's a couple key points for you to remember about how to find the y-intercept. You can always plug it in, but there's a couple of things that will save you time if you notice. Okay, so if C is a number, so remember in the step 1 I asked you to find A, B, and C. if C is a number, our constant, like it's there, then basically the y-intercept is going to be 0, comma C, whatever it is. If C is not there, like C is missing, you don't have a constant, it's ax squared plus bx, there's no C, then your C is 0, so your y-intercept would be 0, 0. So it's not that you can go ahead and plug in 0, it's just you'll always will get that C. And then the last step that you have to do is just find, you need to have a total of 5 points on your graph, one of them being the vertex. So if you don't have 5 points, you just need to find a couple more. Sometimes all you have to do is pick a point, or pick a number, plug it in, get a point, and then you'll find a mirror image. And when we go to graph it, you'll see. So now what we're going to do is we're actually going to work through these problems. So we are going to do example 1. And example 1 is going to be h of x equals 4x squared minus 8x plus 1. So the first thing that I'm going to have you guys do is define A, B, and C. And you'll get so used to it that it's going to go really fast. So A is what? B is -8. Remember, take the operation in front of it. And then C is, okay. So now we have to decide if not our vertex yet, if our parabola opens up or down. So does our parabola open up or down? Our parabola opens up. And I'm going to say why right here, and that is because the parabola opens up because A is a positive number. And in this case, A is a positive 4. Then the next thing it says, step 3 is our vertex the maximum or the minimum value? The vertex is the minimum value because A is a positive number. Okay, so far we just know. We defined A, B, and C. We said our parabola opens up, and our vertex is the minimum, and is the minimum value because A is a positive number. Now what we're going to do is we're going to find that axis of symmetry. You have to find the axis of symmetry because that's the first number in your vertex. So when we did these in chapter 2, we made a table. Now what we need to do is we need to follow some of the guidelines so we can find those vertexes. So x equals the opposite of b over 2a. Anytime I do it in your notes, you guys, I am actually going to write the formula and plug it in for you so that you can actually see how I'm getting it. So I'm going to write the negative. I'm going to write this negative sign. And then what is b? What did we define b as? -8. So I'm going to put -8 in parentheses. This means 2 times a. So it's going to be 2 times 4 because 4 is a. And I got that 4 from here. And now the opposite of -8 is 8. 8 divided by 2 times 4, well, 2 times 4 is 8. So 8 divided by 8 is 1. So my axis of symmetry equals 1. Then the next part is find the vertex. Well, to find the vertex, I'm going to take this 1 and I'm going to plug it into my equation that I got. So this is my axis of symmetry. I'm going to take this and plug it into this equation. And I'm going to change my h of x to a y. Y equals 4, and instead of x, I'm going to write 1. And then plus 1. So I replaced x's with 1's because that was x equals 1. I just replaced it in this equation. So I plugged it in, and I got my answer as -3. Well, in my notes, it said the vertex, right? The vertex is the axis of symmetry, which is 1, and then whatever answer you got from plugging the axis of symmetry in. So, if you have your graph paper, what I want you to do is I want you to go and graph 1, -3.